But wasn't that also because, for instance, the NDLEA, the setting up, it was under a military personnel during that period? Isn't that also because of that? I mean, they were able to prioritize training for them.
The first set of leaders of NDLEA were actually drawn from the police. If you remember Yakilome, Onovo, including the president. In fact, the only time a military person had led that institution was Bamai, the late Bamai. So all of them were drawn from either serving police officers or retired. And in terms of resource allocation, NDLEA has not fared any better, than the police. But my question, to return to it, why was it that these other institutions were able to privilege and, to a reasonable extent, resource their training institutions, and the police appears not to have done so? My answer is prioritization. In the police, the Nigerian police force, training and training institutions are not really privileged institutions. If anything, if you ask any police officer, they are punishment centers where people who have fallen out of favor from their superiors are sent to. Whereas in the others, the best, in fact, if you go to any military training institution, the top of the class are retained in those institutions. In the case of the police, even people who are doing well, when they realize that, look, if I come tops of this class, it might mean me going back, they deliberately underperform. I'm telling you, this is what is happening. Because when you are sent there for the 3 or 4 years you are going to be there, you will not engage in transaction. You will not come in contact with a lot of people, which is where resources come. And then it returns to the issue, how come we have allowed our police force to be dependent on donation? You can't run a police force through donation. Now, last year's budget for the police was 11 billion. Only 9 billion was released. How can an institution over 350,000 be run with 9 billion? Within that same year, the special advisor on the Niger Delta, his budget was 70 billion. The House of the Vice President was, as we told, 16 billion. And the largest employer of labor within the Federal Civil Service had only 9 billion. So for me, it's both a prioritization, because yes, we say they are not adequately funded. But one thing you learn in high school economics is that resources will always be scarce. And that's why you are taught to scale your preferences. You put the ones topmost on your need, so that with limited resources, you address them.
Now, if you go back to the simple economics that we had in high school, it comes back to those who should look after the police. If the police is the first that we come in contact when we talk about governance, how come we as a people, as Margaret rightly said, it didn't just start in this administration, over time, as old as 70 years now, how come that we have never said anything or done anything about it? And even if monies were given, you've done so many researches on police reforms in the country, is anyone bothered about the 9 billion, let's say it was even small? Has anyone bothered to find out how it was utilized? Because what people saw on that particular video didn't show any sign of paucity of fund. It shows a lack of funds. So it doesn't look as if they even got that 9 billion you talked about.
Well, the first thing to point out is that police has not always been the first power of the state in this country, because for a very long time we had military regimes that actually used military officials in law enforcement. Up until 1999, the military were leading all anti-crime task forces across Nigeria.
Did that affect the police in any way?
Of course. It undermined the police in terms of resourcing, in terms of psychological boost, because wherever you set up these committees, you put the military as in charge, and then he will command the rest of the people involved in that group. And so over time, police began to develop, if you like, an inferiority complex when they are working with the military. And in 1999, when the military returned to the barracks, they returned with all their equipment, the communication, the vehicles, and that left the police in the sorry state. Because if you must also ask, how did this whole thing develop? I think during Abacha, there was moratorium on recruitment. And if there was moratorium on recruitment and promotion, it meant the training institutions where the people were to be trained were abandoned. So in 1999, when they began this 5-year development plan of recruiting 40,000 every year over a 5 years period, the training centers were not prepared for this massive influx. So over the years, it kept deteriorating. To that's one of the people who will be speaking in your panel tomorrow described them as garbage in, garbage out, because he was at the time running one of the institutions. So over this period, things have not been allowed to, the police have not been adequately resourced. But then on the issue of transaction, which is where contracting comes in now, the people that get the contract to maintain or provide facilities in this institution, not just the police, across the federal civil service, have nothing. They knew less to nothing about this. These are politicians, most of them in the parliament, most of them in the executive. All of them have private companies. They outsource this thing. So when those people get the contract, then they look for third persons, fourth persons to do it. And that's how the money will keep dropping. So at the end of the day, whoever goes there is just to go and, if it's flooring the cement and the floor, you just pour cement. And because the people who will approve completion of the contract are accomplices in this fraud, they will certify all of them as performed without even,
going to see it. One of the things that was the president's concern when he visited was the issue of discipline. Is there any relationship between resource and maintaining discipline?
Well, I actually would say, if you ask me why this thing had gone this way, it's part of discipline in the police. Because I can't imagine any sector in civil society where things will go like this and people will not come and say their mind about what is happening. It's essentially because the police is a disciplined institution. And from recruitment, you are made to realize that it's obey the last order, your superior. And that if you go out there and run your mouth about what is happening, you will be punished for it. So it actually works in the very opposite. That because the police is a disciplined institution, that people will live under these circumstances and come out every day and smile to you and I.
Mr. Chukwuma, must mom be the word when things go the way we've just seen in the police colleges?
Mom should not be in, but the police have also been statutorily barred to actually voice this. On this program and various panels, we have recommended that they should be allowed to unionize, at least the rank and file, the junior officers, which will provide a platform for them to negotiate, to aid their views about where things are going wrong. But because they were not allowed to do that, and on the number of occasions where they have tried to ventilate their views, it was branded or regarded as mutiny, and many of them suffered for it. We had in 2002, when there was this attempted strike across it, those who led that thing, have we bothered to find out what their lot is today in Nigeria? And we've also had, police officers. You had the Alozio Gubwaja when he was the PRO here, and talked about how things were happening in the military and the police. What happened to them? He's today in a sorry state. So people who are looking at those who have spoken out in the past and how they ended up will not be too eager to
But in terms of speaking up, I mean, could it be that successive governments have been shielded from actually knowing the true state of affairs in our police training institutions?
I wouldn't say far from that. It's because successive governments and principal individuals in those governments have been the ones that got these contracts, took the money. So the moral high ground to speak up about, because you'll be pointing fingers at yourself. That's why they have not. All of them get, whenever the budget is now that they are negotiating budgets, they invite all these agencies, if we approve this, what is it? And they get the contracts.